So many teams could have made it to the Super Bowl, but they didn't because of one reason: their quarterback.
FIEDLER with time, throws intercepted at the 10. Torrey James, and should go all the way.
Some teams that had loaded rosters, studs all over the field, didn't even reach the Super Bowl because their signal caller let them down. Let's take a look back at 10 NFL teams that would have won a Super Bowl if their QB didn't stink. Starting off in the Windy City, it was the Mitch Trubisky-led Bears, which had their best chance to win a Super Bowl in 2018. The first season in what went on to become the deeply troubled Matt Nagy regime. Nagy took over for John Fox, who apparently put together a pretty solid defensive unit during his time in Chicago. And the squad was really put over the top with the acquisition of 2016 Defensive Player of the Year linebacker Khalil Mack. Chicago really mortgaged their future for Mack, dealing 2 first-round picks, a 3rd-rounder, and a 6th-rounder for him. Not to mention the cap impact that Mack had once he signed his 6-year, $141 million extension. But the decision to go for it was respected at the time, and for a while it looked like it was going to pay off. Chicago finished the regular season at 12-4, despite the inconsistent play from 2nd-year quarterback Mitch Trubisky. Even in what was widely regarded as his best season as a pro, Trubisky was the clear weak link on a team that, in addition to its fearsome defense, had playmakers on the offensive side of the ball, with the likes of wide receiver Allen Robinson and running backs Jordan Hayward and Tariq Cohen. It wasn't that Trubisky was horrendous that year. I mean, he did end up making it to the Pro Bowl as an alternate selection, but it seemed like every time that the Bears really needed him to lead the drive, particularly in the pass-only situations, he was unable to deliver. And while the obvious miss for Chicago was the infamous double doink, the reality is, if Chicago had a more seasoned quarterback under center, or say Patrick Mahomes or Deshaun Watson, both of whom were available when they traded up to get Mitch, they probably wouldn't have ended up in the tough situation that they were in at the end of that game. This whole experience was specifically haunting for Bears fans, not just because the team had gone all in with the acquisition of Khalil Mack, but also because they had already experienced a team like this about a decade earlier, with a squad that actually reached the Super Bowl. The 2006 Chicago Bears finished the season 13-3 after a tightly contested divisional matchup with the Seahawks. They cruised through the NFC title game, besting the Saints 39-14. Unfortunately, the limitations of their offense, which relied on a kick returner in Devin Hester for big plays, came up short in the Super Bowl against the Colts by a score of 29-17. And that was with Hester returning the opening kickoff in electric fashion. What wasn't electric? Rex Grossman, their widely inconsistent quarterback, who posed little threat to the Colts defense, completing 20 passes for a paltry 165 yards, while turning the ball over twice with a pair of interceptions that put an undue amount of pressure on the staunch Chicago defense. The reality is that even with 4 bona fide superstar Pro Bowl players on the defense in linebackers Brian Urlacher, Lance Briggs, Brandon Ayan-Badejo, and defensive tackle Tommy Harris, they were up against Peyton Manning and that high-flying Colts offense, and they needed more out of that offense if they wanted to get the job done. Not even saying that they needed to go out there and score 30 points. Merely protecting the ball would have been a good start. Just a few years later, it was the New York Jets experiencing similar issues. They had an elite defense that was capable of winning most games by themselves, but they were ultimately limited by the realities of having Mark Sanchez as their starting quarterback. Sanchez's time with the Jets actually has a lot of parallels to the Trubisky experience in Chicago. In 2009, Sanchez's rookie season, finishing the regular season having thrown 12 touchdowns to 20 interceptions, despite having very little responsibility foisted upon him. Nevertheless, the Jets backed into the playoffs and delivered a couple of big-time upsets. First against the Bengals in the wild-card round, 24-14. Then in the divisional round, beating a heavily favored Chargers team 17-14 to advance to the AFC title game. And when more was asked of him against the juggernaut Colts team in the AFC Championship, Sanchez proved unable to deliver. And eventually the Jets defense ran out of steam against what was another high-flying Colts offense. New York ended up losing 30-17. The Jets actually had a chance to win the Super Bowl in the following year as well, again making it to the AFC Championship game, this time against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who defeated them by a final score of 24-19, again capitalizing on Sanchez's limitations under center. To his credit, Sanchez actually played better against the Steelers. He protected the ball and connected on 2 touchdown passes on top of his 233 passing yards. But there's no denying that the Steelers defense was far from frightened by what Sanchez could do with the ball in his hands. They deployed the classic classic let this guy beat us strategy, strategically bringing on a ton of pressure in the box and successfully stifling the Jets' run game, which was held under 80 yards despite ranking top 5 in attempts and yards during the regular season. Staying in the AFC East, we saw something similar play out in Miami during the early 2000s, when the Fins were struggling to find a suitable replacement for Hall of Fame quarterback Dan Marino. Miami's best chance came in the 2000 season, when they finished the year 11-5 despite having Jay Fiedler under center. This came on the strength of a defensive unit that finished the regular season 3rd in scoring and 6th in yardage allowed. The defense was littered with Pro Bowlers, 2 on the defensive line in Trace Armstrong and future Hall of Famer Jason Taylor, 2 in the linebacking core in Larry Izzo and Zach Thomas, and 2 in the defensive backfield with cornerback Sam Madison and safety Brock Marion. There was little that those guys could do come playoff time, when Fiedler threw for just 135 yards while tossing 3 picks and 0 touchdowns in an embarrassing 27-0 loss to the Raiders. You have to wonder if Dan Marino wishes he stuck around another year to try and finally get the Super Bowl monkey off his back. Too bad he was shamed into retirement after his 62-7 loss to the Jags in the postseason the year before. The reality is, throwing 3 picks is just not a recipe for success in any NFL game, let alone the postseason. But Fiedler isn't the only guy guilty of these sort of abysmal performances, which ultimately prevented an otherwise elite team from reaching Super Bowl glory. How about KORDELL Stewart and the role he played in holding back the 2001 Steelers from greatness? Now, this is not to disparage the man formerly known as Slash, as he was a Pro Bowler that year, and a big part of what made that 01 Steelers team work. But there's no denying that he was limited in what he could do, especially during crunch time when opposing defenses would force him to drop back and throw the ball, which is exactly what Bill Belichick had his defense do. They limited him on the ground to just 8 carries for 41 yards, and Stewart threw the ball 42 times, which was never really his recipe for success. He connected on just 24 of those passes for 255 yards, and tossed 3 picks and no touchdowns. This was a special Steelers team too. They were top 3 in yardage and top 7 in points scored on both offense and defense. By all accounts, they had the best defense in the NFL that year. Too bad they didn't have the right guy at quarterback to hoist another Lombardi trophy in the Steel City. This team was eerily reminiscent of the 2017 Vikings, which had the #1 ranked defense in the league, bar none, and a top 10 offense in points scored. They finished the regular season at 13-3. with the #2 seed in the NFC, and they look poised for a deep postseason run, which, thanks to the Minneapolis Miracle, they made. But the Bucs came up short in a big way in the NFC Championship, as Case Keenum rather abruptly turned back from a prince to a frog, throwing 2 picks and losing a fumble, and serving as a major factor in the 38-7 thumping Minnie received from the Eagles. As bad as Keenum was, overall I think I'd rather have him than Kerry Collins, who hamstrung a 13-3 Titans team in 2008 that could have and probably should have been destined for Super Bowl glory. The 08 Titans had a top 5 defense and a dynamic rushing attack led by Chris Johnson and Lendell White. To Collins' credit, he, like Slash, had a resurgent year, earning Pro Bowl honors during the regular season. But once the postseason rolled around, it was clear that he wasn't the guy to get Tennessee over the hump. They ran up against a beastly Ravens team in the divisional round that dared Collins to beat them, something he was incapable of doing, as Tennessee fell 13-10. Kind of like what happened when we saw the 1999 Buccaneers with Shaun King under center. In fact, Tampa Bay had an even more extreme disparity between their offense and defense. They had one of the top-rated defenses in the league, but their offense lagged from behind. In the bottom tier of most categories, King did little to inspire confidence in the regular season, other than some successful game managing behind one of the best defenses in recent memory. And it got worse in the playoffs. Tampa mustered up just 6 points during the NFC Championship game against the Rams, and King struggled mightily, throwing 2 picks and for just 163 yards, finishing with a 34.1 rating. Woof. Last and certainly least is the 1977 Falcons, who have the dubious distinction of being one of the single best teams to ever not qualify for the playoffs, despite having allowed the fewest points in the entire NFL. I mean, think about it. That is hard to do. They literally had the best defense in the league, first in scoring, second in yards, and because of the 25th ranked offense, they finished 7-7 and on the outside of the playoffs looking in. Atlanta had 2 quarterbacks splitting time that year. It's Scott Hunter and Steve Bartkowski, both of which were massively disappointing. Neither QB completed over 50% of their passes and both threw more interceptions than touchdowns, with Bartkowski reigning supreme by throwing 14 picks on just 136 attempts. And even so, they barely missed making the playoffs. Imagine what that team could have accomplished with even an average starter at the helm. Which do you think was the best NFL team to be led down by their quarterback? Join me in the comment section below. Make sure to follow myself and TPS on social media. We post great content all the time. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, we're on everything. Go subscribe, go follow. If you like this video, give it a like. It takes one click down below and subscribe to TPS. We post videos every day. Every day is a new video. Of course, thank you so much for watching. I'm Jason Biondo. I'll see you next time.
My knees.